again. Today I'd like to talk about a term that's had a big influence on how we approach language teaching, how we understand language learning. That's the term communicative competence. Communicative competence. To understand this term, we really need to go back and look at another term that's widely used, and that's the term linguistic competence. What's the difference between the two? If we think of traditionally how languages were taught, they were often approached through the grammar. Mastery of the language was based on studying the sentences and the grammatical rules of a language. And that aspect of language knowledge is really what linguistic competence refers to. Linguistic competence refers to the ability we have to create accurate sentences in the language. So the sentence is the target when we talk about linguistic competence. And so if you look at grammar books, the sort of books your students study, reference books and so on, they typically show how sentences are organized. And of course, knowing the rules of sentence formation is an important part of language learning ability. But what's important also is knowing how those sentences are used in communication, and that's what communicative competence really refers to. It's how we use our knowledge of language in communication. Let me give you an example. Supposing I wanted you to get me a glass of water. I could say, please get me a glass of water. I could say, could I have a glass of water? I suppose I could also say, what is wanted by me is that you get me a glass of water. Now that latter sentence doesn't sound natural, does it? It's linguistically correct, it follows the rules of English, but it's not something that people would typically say. So our linguistic competence tells us what sentences in a language are grammatically accurate. Our communicative competence tells us what utterances in a language are communicatively appropriate. In other words, how do we explain things? How do we describe things? How do we give instructions, make complaints, suggestions, and so on? This is what our communicative competence enables us to do. It really is the capacity we have to use language in ways that are appropriate for the context, for the situation, for the participants and the relationship between them, and so on. And so mastery of a language means mastering a language in a way that is communicatively appropriate for the circumstances in which we're going to use it. Now, this notion of communicative competence prompted a rethinking about approaches to language teaching. It prompted a rethinking about what a syllabus for a language course might be like, because rather than a syllabus just being built around a succession of grammatical items, how would you organize a syllabus that was focusing on communicative competence? There are different ways it can be done. Using a focus on functions is one, a focus on tasks, a focus on fluency activities, and a focus on different texts in different contexts. So there are different ways in which the notion of communicative competence can be turned into a syllabus. And if you look at language teaching materials today, looking at the scope of sequence of the books that I write, for example, you'll see that all of those things are there in the syllabus. Functions, tasks, activities, a distinction between fluency activities and accuracy activities that reflect this distinction between linguistic competence and communicative competence. So when we're teaching a language, we're teaching both. We're teaching sentences, how sentences are created. We're teaching students to develop the capacity to produce correct sentences, but we're also interested in the capacity the students will acquire to use those sentences as part of their communicative competence, as part of their communicative ability to use English as a second or foreign language, or to use it as an international language. So that's what communicative competence is really all about.